if you think the foundation of your body is just, bone and blood, you're missing the actual architectural miracle. Welcome back to the deep dive.
Hey there.
Today, we are going deep into the extracellular matrix, or the ECM. And it's the complex, dynamic architecture that surrounds nearly every cell you have.
Yeah.
We're not talking about passive filler or some simple glue. This is the operating environment for your entire system. And the biochemistry that dictates its strength is genuinely mind-boggling.
It's really the silent majority of tissue volume. If you look at this material, our sources are effectively giving us the blueprint for the human machine. You see that the ECM is what provides protection. It defines tissue shape.
Right.
And it allows for these critical properties like elasticity and recoil.
Yeah.
Essential for things like your lungs and your large arteries.
And crucially, it's centrally involved in pathology.
Oh, absolutely. When the ECM fails or it gets attacked, that's where you see diseases ranging from, say, rheumatoid arthritis all the way to unchecked cancer cell spread.
So our mission today is to identify the core components that build the scaffold. We have to map out the three major classes of biomolecules.
Right. So you've got the big structural proteins, the specialized adhesive proteins, and then the proteoglycans, which form this highly hydrated ground substance.
And the goal is to walk away understanding that tissue failure, whether it's brittle bones or leaky kidneys, is fundamentally a chemical failure right at this matrix level.
Exactly.
So let's unpack this, starting with the biggest building block of them all, collagen.
Collagen is, well, it's without question the undisputed king. It accounts for something like 25% of all protein mass in a mammal.
25%? That's huge.
It is. We know of nearly 30 different types, each one kind of custom engineered for its specific location, but they all share the same fundamental job, providing a robust extracellular framework.
So if it's a quarter of our body protein, it has to be incredibly tough. How did nature solve the challenge of building such a huge, rigid cable structure for our tendons and skin and bone?
Nature solved it with the triple helix. So imagine three individual polypeptide chains, each twisted into a left-handed helix.
Okay.
Then those three chains are braided together, almost like a super rope, into this stable right-handed superhelix. This makes the molecule rod-like and just incredibly strong.
And what's fascinating is the tiny chemical requirement that makes this possible.
It's the repeating sequence of glycine XYN.
Okay, so why is glycine at every third position absolutely non-negotiable?
It all comes down to physics and spatial constraints. The central core of that triple helix, right where the three chains meet, is so tightly packed, there is physically no room for anything bigger than a single hydrogen atom.
And glycine is the only one.
It's the only amino acid whose side chain is just that single hydrogen atom. It's the only residue small enough to fit. If you substitute it with any bulky amino acid, even just one, the entire helix destabilizes. The structure fails.
And here is where the chemistry truly dictates function, because those X and Y positions are often proline and hydroxyproline, which give it that necessary rigidity.
They do.
And the creation of hydroxyproline ties directly back to a simple vitamin.
It does. See, hydroxyproline and hydroxylation, they aren't incorporated directly. They're formed after the protein chain is built in a process called post-translational modification.
Okay.
The enzymes, prolyl hydroxylase and lysyl hydroxylase, are responsible, and they have an absolute requirement for ascorbic acid vitamin C as a cofactor.
So if you lack vitamin C, the classic deficiency, scurvy, what actually happens to the collagen chain?
You just can't perform the hydroxylation. Without enough hydroxylated proline and lysine, the crucial hydrogen bonds that stabilize that triple helix, they just can't form effectively.
So the whole thing is weaker.
Way weaker. The collagen that's produced is unstable, and it simply falls apart at normal body temperatures. This perfectly explains the bleeding gums, the poor wound healing, and fragile blood vessels you see in scurvy.
It's a direct chemical link.
A direct chemical link between a lack of vitamin C and the structural collapse of your connective tissue.
Wow. That is a powerful lesson. Now let's quickly trace the biosynthesis. This molecule starts inside the cell, gets modified, shipped out, and then assembled into massive fibers. That sounds like a logistical nightmare.
It is a remarkable journey. So inside the endoplasmic reticulum, the precursor, which is called procollagen, gets hydroxylated and glycosylated.
Right.
But crucially, C-terminal extension peptides, think of them as little ends on the molecule-formed disulfide bonds. And these extensions are like Velcro strips that help register the three chains together, forcing them to find their alignment and start winding the triple helix.
And once that winding starts, it's locked in.
The ship has sailed. No more hydroxylation can occur.
So once it's secreted out into the extracellular space, those extensions are no longer needed.
Correct. Specialized enzymes, procollagen, aminoproteinase, and carboxyproteinase, they just cleave those extensions right off, leaving behind what's called tropocollagen.
And then these tropocollagen units organize themselves.
They do it spontaneously.
Yeah.
Into the final fiber structure in a very precise quarter-staggered alignment.
What exactly does that quarter-staggered alignment look like, and why does it matter visually?
Okay, so imagine stacking thousands of small bricks, but instead of lining them up end to end, you offset each row by exactly a quarter of the brick's length.
Ah, okay, so you get these regular gaps.
Exactly. It's this staggering that gives connective tissue its characteristic, visible, banded pattern when you look at it under a microscope.
But the fibers are still just lying next to each other, like ropes. We need to tie them together to get that real tensile strength.
Absolutely. The final stage is the chemical spot welding, and that's performed by lysyl oxidase. This enzyme, which importantly is copper-dependent, it oxidatively deaminates lysine and hydroxylation residues.
Okay.
And that converts them into highly reactive aldehydes. These aldehydes then condense, forming stable covalent crosslinks, and these crosslinks are what give tendons their incredible non-stretching strength.
Which explains another clinical link.
Copper deficiency.
Yeah.
Like in Menkes disease. It directly impairs this spot welding process, which leads to unstable collagen.
So if the chemistry of collagen fails, the clinical outcomes are they're severe. Let's talk about the major collagenopathies.
Osteogenesis imperfecta, OI, or brittle bone disease is the classic example. It's often caused by a substitution of one of those essential glycine residues with a bulkier amino acid.
And because it can't fit.
The triple helix can't properly fold. This results in what is dramatically termed procollagen suicide.
Procollagen suicide, that sounds devastating.
It is. Because the faulty chain messes up the assembly of the entire molecule, the cell recognizes the deformed structure as defective. So the abnormal molecule gets degraded, and it takes with it the two normal chains that were synthesized alongside it.
So a single faulty chain acts as a saboteur.
Exactly. It leads to the destruction of three chains. This dominant negative effect explains the severe clinical presentation.
And then we have the spectrum of Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome, EDS, characterized by extreme flexibility and tissue fragility.
EDS involves many defects. You have the highly dangerous vascular subtype, involving type 3 collagen, which results in fragile arteries and organs prone to spontaneous rupture.
Terrifying.
And then the kyphoscoliosis subtype, which is a clear failure in that post-translational modification we just discussed, a deficiency in lysyl hydroxylase. The raw materials just weren't modified correctly for cross-linking.
And what about Alport syndrome? That's type EV collagen, which is found in these specialized tissue sheets called basement membranes.
Right, and because type EV collagen is the defining protein of the basement membrane in the kidneys, inner ear, and eyes, when it's defective, the membrane fails in all three places.
So you got kidney failure, hearing loss, vision problems.
Exactly. From a single protein failure cascading across organ systems.
Let's pivot from the rigid, non-stretchy strength of collagen to its exact opposite, elastin. What makes elastin specialized for elastic recoil?
Elastin is the true bouncy castle of the body. It allows structures like your large arteries to expand with a pulse wave and then snap right back.
And it's completely different from collagen.
Almost its opposite. No triple helix, no Gly-X-Y or repeat, and very few of those hydroxylated residues. Instead, it relies on random coil conformations that allow it to stretch significantly.
So how does it get its durability if it doesn't have that collagen scaffolding?
Through these unique, incredibly stable crosslinks called desmosines. These structures are formed when 4 lysine residues condense together.
Let me guess, lysyl oxidase is involved again.
You got it. Lysyl oxidase is doing the work. These desmosine crosslinks lock the elastin fiber into a three-dimensional network, making it highly insoluble, stable, and able to return to its original shape after stretching.
We mentioned the elastin gene deletion can cause Williams-Beuren syndrome. Now, before we leave structural proteins, we have to talk about fibrillin 1.
Fibrillin 1 is absolutely crucial. You should think of it as the scaffolding or the blueprint that guides where and how elastin is laid down. Without the fibrillin microfibrils, the elastin network just doesn't form correctly.
And the most dramatic consequence of defective fibrillin is Marfan syndrome.
Precisely. Marfan is caused by mutations in the fibrillin 1 gene. This leads to defects across multiple elastic tissues, skeletal issues like very long fingers, eye defects like lens dislocation, and most dangerously, aortic dilation.
But here's a key insight.
The key insight is that fibrillin 1 normally binds and sequesters the cytokine TGF-beta. When fibrillin 1 is defective, it releases excessive, unregulated TGF-beta signaling, and that causes the damage.
So the disease isn't just a structural failure, it's a signaling error that damages the tissue.
Yes, and that understanding is driving research into drugs like losartan, which can antagonize TGF-beta error and may help mitigate the catastrophic cardiovascular outcomes of Marfan.
That brings us neatly into the specialized proteins that handle communication between the cell interior and the matrix exterior. Let's look at fibronectin.
Fibronectin is this massive adhesive dimer, and it's found everywhere. It's gluing cells to the matrix, it's floating in plasma, it's on cell surfaces. It's the ultimate multitasker.
But its most critical job is communication.
Right, communicating with the cell.
And the language of that communication is a tiny 3-letter molecular password.
It is the famous RGD sequence, RGLIASP. This sequence is the universal cell binding domain, and it's recognized by transmembrane receptors called integrins.
The integrins act like molecular handshakes.
A perfect analogy. They reach out from the cell and grab the RGD sequence on the matrix.
And when that handshake happens, it creates a structure called a focal adhesion.
Exactly. The integrin handshake indirectly links the extracellular matrix to the actin microfilaments, the internal cytoskeleton, via attachment proteins inside the cell.
So the cell is constantly sensing its environment.
Constantly. This is vital for cell migration, for differentiation, and tissue stability. And when cells become cancerous, they often lose this adhesiveness precisely because the integrin RGD signaling is faulty, which allows them to break free and migrate.
That link is powerful. Now, turning to another specialized adhesive protein, laminin, which is central to the formation of basal laminus.
Right. Laminin is the major glycoprotein of those basal laminus, the specialized sheets that sit right beneath epithelial cells. Laminin forms networks that anchor type 5e collagen and link to other matrix components.
Let's use the kidney's glomerular basal lamina to illustrate its brilliant function. How does the body stop essential plasma proteins like albumin from just spilling into the urine?
The kidney has this brilliant dual filtration strategy. First, it uses size selectivity, pores that mechanically restrict molecules larger than about 8 nanometers.
Okay, that makes sense.
But second, and this is critical, it uses charge selectivity. The basal lamina contains huge amounts of highly negative charges from components like heparin sulfate proteoglycans.
And since plasma proteins like albumin are also negatively charged,
The lamina uses electrostatic repulsion. Negative repels negative. It prevents them from crossing the barrier.
so if that charge barrier is damaged, as happens in some types of glomerulonephritis, we lose the protection.
Precisely. The negative repulsion is lost, and massive amounts of negatively charged albumin are allowed to pass, resulting in severe protein leakage or albuminuria.
Finally, we arrive at the ground substance itself. Proteoglycans and glycosaminoglycans. JAG-Gs. I love the analogy of the proteoglycan aggregate as the bottle brush.
It's the best way to visualize it. So proteoglycans are core proteins with numerous covalently linked gag chains sticking out.
Right.
And these core proteins, in turn, are often non-covalently attached along a huge central strand of hyaluronic acid, creating this massive structure that looks just like a giant bottle brush.
What gives GAGs their functional superpower, that gel-like consistency and turgor?
GAGs are unbranched, polyanionic polysaccharides. They carry huge negative charges. And because they're so anionic, they act like molecular sponges. They bind cations like sodium and potassium, which in turn draws massive amounts of water into the matrix via osmotic pressure.
And this water attraction creates turgor.
Exactly. The firmness and resistance to deformation in the tissue. This gel also acts as a molecular sieve, restricting large molecules but letting small nutrients and oxygen diffuse freely.
The biosynthesis of GAGs involves complicated modifications, specifically sulfation.
That sulfation step is key to their charge. It's catalyzed by sulfotransferases using a high-energy compound called PPS, or active sulfate. It's a tightly regulated process that's essential for creating the full polyanionic charge needed for water binding.
We covered that hyaluronic acid is unique, not attached to a core protein. We should also mention chondroitin sulfates are vital for cartilage compressibility, and heparin is the body's natural potent anticoagulant.
Right.
But when the body can't break these down, we run into devastating problems.
That's the entire class of storage diseases called mucopolysaccharidoses, MPSs, including Hurler and Hunter syndromes. See, GAGs have a slow turnover rate, and they are degraded by specific lysosomal hydrolases.
So if you have a genetic deficiency in just one of these enzymes,
The GAGs just accumulate inside the cell's lysosomes. For example, a defect in alpha-iduronidase in MPFI leads to dermatan sulfate and heparin sulfate building up. This accumulation leads to multi-organ dysfunction, severe skeletal abnormalities, and often mental retardation. A textbook example of a single enzyme failure destroying structure across the entire body.
let's dedicate a moment to the most specialized forms of ECM, bone, and cartilage.
Bone is the ultimate structural tissue. Its organic framework is primarily type I collagen, but the defining feature is the inorganic mineral component, hydroxyapatite calcium phosphate, which provides incredible compressive strength.
And bone is dynamic, constantly remodeled by osteoclasts, which resorb it, and osteoblasts, which deposit it. So how does the osteoclast act as a specialized demolition crew?
The osteoclast is a fascinating cell. It seals itself against the bone surface, the ruffled border, creating a confined microenvironment. It then uses a specialized pump, a proton translocating ATPase, to flood that sealed space with acid, driving the pH down to 4.0 or even lower.
And that acid just dissolves the mineral.
It chemically dissolves the hydroxyapatite. Once that's gone, lysosomal proteases are released to digest the exposed collagen matrix.
And if that acid pump system fails,
You get osteopetrosis or marble bone disease. The body can deposit bone, but it cannot resort it. This is often caused by a deficiency in carbonic anhydrase II, CA2, an enzyme the osteoclast needs to generate those protons. And of course, osteoporosis is just a failure to maintain that balance.
resorption outpaces deposition.
Exactly.
Finally, cartilage. A vascular, flexible, and designed for absorbing massive compressive forces.
Cartilage relies on type II collagen for its framework, but its compressibility comes from the proteoglycan and aggrecan. Aggrecan is this gargantuan molecule linked to hyaluronic acid, studded with hundreds of highly charged chondroitin sulfate chains.
So when you compress cartilage, the water gets squeezed out.
But the highly charged JAGs instantly attract that water right back, giving cartilage its resilient, springy quality.
And the most common form of dwarfism, Achondroplasia, is a defect in cartilage that often gets confused with a collagen issue.
And it is essential to note that achondroplasia is not a collagenopathy. It is caused by a mutation in the FGFR3 gene, the fibroblast growth factor receptor 3. This mutation leads to a faulty receptor, disrupting the normal regulation of cartilage formation. It's a cell signaling problem, not a structural protein defect.
What an incredible deep dive into the body's structural foundation. To synthesize this, what are the two core takeaways you want our listeners to leave with?
Well, first, structure is built on chemical constraints. The strength of collagen relies entirely on the presence of that tiny glycine, and the flexibility of elastin depends on the unique desmosine crosslinks.
Okay, so chemistry dictates form.
And second, health hinges on small details. A tiny three-letter RGD sequence dictates cell behavior, and the polyanionic charge of GAGs dictates tissue turgor and allows the kidney to function. Deficiencies, whether they're genetic like MPS or nutritional like scurvy, are almost always traceable back to a failure in these microscopic chemical reactions.
It is astonishing that the physical strength of our entire body hinges on having enough vitamin C for hydroxylation, or having the correct lysosomal enzyme. It's chemistry on a grand scale.
And that leads to a final provocative thought for you to consider. If the structure of the ECM is constantly being remodeled and adapted based on signals, and we now understand the precise enzymes that build, maintain, and tear it down, what are the implications of a targeted chemical intervention?
Right.
What if we could target enzymes like lysyl oxidase or alpha-L-iduronidase? What does that hold for the future of regenerative medicine in treating these complex genetic disorders? Can we repair a brittle bone or a ruptured aorta just by tuning the molecular spot welds?
Something to think about. Thank you for diving deep with us.